You can record on your end as well, Crystal. That way we have a backup.
Okay.
And I have to come. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
All right. Okay.
Just giving it a couple minutes so everybody can find their Zoom link to join us. Thanks, Vanessa, for letting us know where you're from Canada. Love it. If anybody else is interested in sharing where they're calling in from, we love to hear that.
Canada.
Canada.
That's where all the Canadians are. It's from Canada. So I'm currently calling from Massachusetts. I'm visiting family. I haven't seen my mother, my father, my stepmother in about a year and a half. And it's also my father's 80th birthday this week, 80. And he's got advancing dementia. And we'll be covering how genetics relates to, we're not going to linger on it, but for those of you that have aging parents, it's kind of on my radar at the moment. And we'll be talking briefly about why getting your genetics also apply if you have a risk for neurodegeneration, which I do on both sides of my family. Lucky me. We're going to touch on why doing genetics is also going to help mitigate the risk factors for that. This is not going to be a neurodegeneration talk, but it is so on my radar. And I'm sure on a number of other people's radars, given it's the nature of the holidays and family gatherings. And if you are concerned about your particular fate or the fate of someone you know and love, you'll definitely enjoy this talk. I think, Crystal, is anyone else? Are we waiting for anyone else? Or should we get started?
We're good.
Okay.
Let's begin.
Okay. So thank you all for coming. And my name is Dr. Sam Shea, Dr. Samuel Shea. I'm a functional medicine practitioner, and I've got several long long circuitous journey to how I got where I am. I'm with the Institute for Functional Medicine. I'm a certified practitioner. I'm with the Kalish Institute for Functional Medicine. And long circuitous career, doctorate in chiropractic, also an acupuncturist, trained with one of the top osteopaths in Australasia, been studying naturopathic nutrition for over 20 years, been involved in natural medicine since I read my first book and took my first seminar on it 25 years ago. So it's been a very long journey, and genetics has been one of the most recent amazing components that I've added to this entire natural health puzzle. So today we're going to talk about listening to your genes, and very practical, hopefully a little fun and quirky as well. So I help people, I focus on helping busy health-minded entrepreneurs, mompreneurs, and leaders find optimal health in their bodies. Why do I help moms and entrepreneurs and leaders? Is because you help mom, you help the family, you help an entrepreneur, you help society. And I got into this because my mom was a mompreneur, and by her own admission, she didn't really take care of herself, and as a result made some decisions. Again, by her own admission, we have a great relationship right now, just so we all know there's a happy ending to the story. I'm actually in my mom's place right now as we're talking. She back then, she admitted she made some decisions on the behalf of her children, especially her youngest, me, that weren't the best, because she was so stressed out and so much pain, physical pain, not sleeping well, not eating well. And I would have done anything to have someone like me have some, time machine and go back and help my mom, which then would have a beneficial effect throughout the whole family, especially to her youngest, who got the brunt of the results of her not living a healthy lifestyle. So that's my why, as I want to help moms and entrepreneurs. And the genetics is a very important piece of that. It's not the only piece. I've got lots of other material on my YouTube channel and my ebooks on functional tests like mitochondria testing, adrenal testing, gut testing. We're not talking about those. We're just focusing on genes today. A missing piece that is not really well understood or actioned on. And okay, there we go. First, so you've taken so coming to this webinar, we're going to cover you've taken the kind of the first step to understand your genetics. And if you're here, that means to me that you're curious, and you've probably already dealt with the confusion about what diet is best for you, and you've tried a whole bunch of stuff, but it only seems to work for other people, whether it's buying the latest goji berry juice to squirt up your nose or whatever, or the latest exercise equipment, or the meditation technique, or any of the 3,000 diets that seem to work for other people, not for oneself. And I've been through all of that on my own journey. I've walked through this very long struggle with my own health problems, and that's one reason I'm here. And during this webinar, I would like to invite people to interact. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Crystal, my business my business manager and ease mentor, will help. You got the nod. All right, thank you. Thank you, Crystal. You got the nod. My business manager and ease mentor will navigate the questions you have. Please don't be shy. Ask the questions. We'll make sure to get to them. And we're going to dive into some really super helpful information. The questions go in the chat, and we'll cover them all at the end, unless there's a super pressing, relevant question that immediately ties right into what I'm talking in the moment. And Crystal will raise a flag to me, let me know. Now, this is like most webinars, there's something special at the end. I know it's cliche, so cliche, and here we are anyway. So there's a very special announcement. Think Black Friday. This is the best winky emoji ever, Crystal. Good job on finding that one. That's like perfect. And so really special goodies coming at the end of this. So definitely stick around. This is this is very special announcement. I don't do this like ever. So stick around. Okay, then that's kind of a hard pivot. Wait, stick to the end, but stop. Okay, but actually what this is about is this is not a conversation about 20. We need an easier transition for that, Crystal. Can we like fade that in? Like, does it have to go like boom, stop? Okay. Anyway, this is not a conversation about 23andMe and ancestry testing. We are not talking about what percentage Irish you are. I know that's super interesting, and I'm super glad we got the picture of the woman has some red hair in the background under the stop thing, so it's kind of on brand with the Irish joke there. They can take it. Anyway, so I do stand-up comedy as a hobby, by the way. So buckle up. This is not about genetics of ancestry. This is not about genetics of curiosity. It's about genetics around your health and well-being and longevity. So we're not fixating on the 30,000 genes. We're going to be focusing on 100, the most important 100 genes. If you want to do the ancestry stuff, great, fine. That's not this. So what we are going to talk about are the genetics to help you, air quotes, stop the clock on the effects of aging. We're going to explain why mainstream genetics tells you very little about your unique health dispositions for your health. There's lots of problems with that. Oops, it's going backwards. I have to hit the arrows. All right, there we go. And then we're also going to cover the 3 different types of weight gain. So this is really interesting. There's 3 types of genetic-based weight gain. This is what I got in my own little corner of the genetics universe. This is how I got famous in this own small little corner of the genetics universe, on figuring out the 3 different types of genetics-based weight gains based on the genetic patterns I observed. So we're going to cover all 3 of them. And if people are struggling to lose weight in particular, they may be dealing with one or more or a combination of these 3 different types of genetic based weight gains. And there's different strategies to apply separately or synergistically, depending on your genetic mix, to help you with your weight. I'll also teach you how to future-proof your brain. This is referencing back to the neurodegeneration issues that my father's gone through and people on my mother's side have gone through as well. And also how there's certain, quote, healthy choices that may be hurting you based on your unique genetics. And while everyone says, oh, they do this thing, it's great because the bell curve population-based science said so. But the problem with bell curve population-based science is that you are not a bell curve. You are somewhere on that bell curve. And if you happen to be in the middle, then that population-based science is great. But if you're on either end of it, not so great. And that's what individualized functional testing, whether it's genetics or like mitochondria or adrenals or whatever, is super important, because you can find where are you and what actual lifestyle, diet, nutrition, etc. applies to you. So again, I told you I was a stand-up comic as a hobby. Buckle up. A fun fact, Crystal, please do find my playlist on YouTube for stand-up comedy. I would invite people not to click on it now. But you can't have a stand-up comic on a camera and not somehow ham it up and want to share with you all the fun work of doing stand-up comedy. So there's a playlist on my YouTube channel. Just put in Dr. Sam Shea, you'll find it. Crystal will find it, but don't watch it now. Watch it. Hey, watch it after your in-laws have left for Thanksgiving, or if you need a quiet moment to kind of reset and you want something funny to watch. There, I have successfully turned the comedy thing into something therapeutic, which is super on brand for being a functional medicine doc. I somehow did that. Crystal, we need to make a slide on that somehow, so I don't forget to say that in the future. Anyway, all right, two genomes walk into a bar. So this is referring back to the healthy choices may actually be hurting you. I'm not saying walking into a bar is healthy necessarily, but there's people of different genetic predispositions to how they handle alcohol. So people like me who are genetically highly vulnerable to the effects and damages of alcohol. I'm a red dot in air quotes. I mean, I can't tolerate alcohol. Alcohol really messes me up. And it's also, you see this a lot genetically across the Asian population. That's why it's called the Asian flush, because they have this set of genes that's very commonplace that makes alcohol metabolism very difficult, whereas other people can tolerate alcohol. Then there's the coffee bar. Now, a lot of people are being told, oh, you just have to have bulletproof coffee. Just chuck as much coconut oil, MCT oil into your coffee and some cinnamon. And it'll be great. Life will be wonderful. It'll be full of rainbows and unicorns and productivity and intermittent fasting. It'll be great. That's not entirely true. So for some people like myself, in-law detox tool. That's hilarious, Crystal. Okay. So watch the comedy. All right. Sorry, just check the chat. All right. So for some people, drinking coffee is incredibly helpful to them. And coffee with fat, really, they metabolize it well. They're able to, drive the ketones into their brain, et cetera, et cetera. But for some people like me, I am really genetically vulnerable to caffeine, where I get, quote, caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. Again, quote, caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. That happens to me. I tried to make the most bulletproofy coffee ever, coconut oil, cinnamon, burdock, clove, coconut milk, salt, licorice. I think I had one point like 12 or 15 different things I put into this to make this most healthy herbal coffee drink. And I was still a jittery, anxious mess 32 minutes to an hour, 90 minutes or so later. And it's just genetically, I couldn't handle caffeine. So this is why we do individual genetic testing. By the way, the alcohol and coffee testing, that's just one of the 5 profiles. That's called the food trigger profile, where it checks for your relationship to gluten, lactose in dairy, caffeine, alcohol, salt, histamines, and other food allergens. So now we get to talk about my doggie, Lily. And so when we're talking about how your life choices affect your health and well-being, one of the best things I ever did was get my little Frenchie, Lily. Lily is super adorable. She's 21 pounds, about 80% muscle and the explosive propulsion of a small meat bullet when she launches after a squirrels. And how I am, I see how my behavior based on how I eat, move, and think affects my relationship with my dog. Now, I don't have kids, but I do have a dog. And what that means is that I just reflect on what happened when I was growing up, when my parents were in their own state and they were affected meaningfully by what they ate, how they moved, and how they thought, and how it affected me. And so I look at Lily as a kind of a microcosm, a gauge of like, okay, am I being present am I living the message or not? And and she's super cute and fun to play. And I also have, if you're on my newsletter, Lily's Corner, which are occasional updates about how Lily's doing. Occasionally she has some thoughts on how I'm doing. So what is genetics testing anyway? Genetics testing is, in the specific way that I do it, is a collection of 5 different cutting edge tests that give you clear insight into your genetic predispositions for your health. Now, again, this is not about what percentage Irish you are. This is about health. And I want you to think, what's my ideal diet? How do I absorb vitamin D? What are my food triggers? How's my cardiovascular health? How's my, brain health? How's my weight, etc. Now, if you have these genetic clues, the question is, are you listening? And the good news is that with testing is that we're able to get the data that we need through really, really, really simple cheek swab that takes less than 5 minutes to do. And my intern and client healthcare coach, Michaela, who's just finishing her master's next month, her master's in functional medicine and human nutrition, she will actually be on the phone, on Zoom rather, and helping you just do the swab, just to help you walk you through it. Super easy. And the good news is that with genetics is that your genes don't change. So you can just get this test once and you're done. I went through a lot of training for this. There's not many of us in the States trained on this methodology. Most people just run to some silly algorithm for 23andMe, and what you get is this massive overwhelm of like 300 health tips, and that's not organized or prioritized. So this is a pretty unique genetics experience. So is there such a thing as bad genetics? And the answer is yes. So this is the one case where you can blame your parents if you have bad genetics, but even with your bad genes from your parents, ultimately it is your responsibility to figure out and do the lifestyle changes to mitigate the effects of what was passed on to you. So I have this one client who he was genetically totally incompatible with alcohol, and he finally got off the alcohol when I showed him his genetics. Now, this is a little sidebar. I had the single greatest tool I have ever found when dealing with, this is a reality in clinical practice, when I deal with stubborn men, I'll repeat that, when I deal with stubborn men, genetics is the single best test I can do because they can't argue with it. It is inarguable. It's adorable when they try to argue, but they can't. If they do an adrenal test for stress, and they can be like, oh, I was stressed that day. It doesn't count. The levels are artificially high, blah, blah, blah. They can't do this with genetics. They can't do it. This situation happened multiple times in my practice. I run their genetics. I see the alcohol genes that are not compatible with alcohol, and I show it to them, and they're like, wow, I guess I have to stop drinking. And I said, in your case, yes. And they stop drinking. And it's like somehow in that mindset, when they see the genetics and it's hard coded, there's no negotiation. It's done. And I have never had an easier time helping stubborn males shift their mindset around health. Now, if you have men in your life that are stubborn, consider skipping the functional tests and directing them to genetics because they can't argue with it. I know I'm speaking in kind of male stereotypes, but when you're in practice long enough, that's real for majority of guys I've worked with. Anyway, so we removed the alcohol. got him onto the right diet. So we figured out the correct genetic-based diet that has carb tolerance, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then we also shifted a couple mindset things, and he ended up having no more panic attacks. He lost 27 pounds. And this is his quote. At the beginning, I was a bit reluctant and skeptical. This is an international entrepreneur, by the way. Yet after 3 months, he lost 13 kgs. That's 27 pounds roughly for us non-Europeans. I'm in better shape physically and mentally. He quit drinking, improved his diet, no more panic attacks, all from Dr. Shea's recommendations based on genetics results. Thank you very much, Sam, exclamation point. This is from Alfredo. So it's big win for him. He lost 27 pounds in 3 months. And no more panic. It's like, this is a huge win for him. Super proud of him. And this is all from genetics. So he's doing really well. He leverages his own genetic wiring to learn what he needs to do to thrive. He's doing great. So just to give you some background, to date, I still have the worst genetics of anyone I've ever tested on. I have to date the most number of red and yellow dots, which means the most number of bad variants or bad genes of anyone I've ever tested, which explained why I was so sick growing up while everyone else apparently was not, and why it's taken so long for me to figure out how to be healthy, the healthier person that I am today. So I am light years healthier than what I was 25, 30, years ago, where I was just a freaking mess. And when I first got my genetics report, to be really frank, I cried for about an hour because I was so despondent. Oh my God, I have such crappy genes. And then I snapped out of it because then I realized, wait a minute, hold on. I got this genetics report. It doesn't mean I'm doomed. I actually now have the list of recommendations based on the genes that I have. And I changed them. And within 1 week of changing my diet, all my digestive problems of over 20 years went away. This is the genetics of learning my carb tolerance. Within 1 week of changing it to my carb tolerance, it just, like, my whole life, my digestive life changed. And no longer was I emptying yoga rooms and melting paint and killing flies with my gas, and didn't have any bloating and the pain digestion. It went away. And it wasn't a quality issue because I had like the most perfect Portlandia diet ever, with knowing the names of the farmers, the chickens, and the quinoa raised by left-handed monks and picked on the harvest moon and blah, blah, blah. It was a quantity issue, not a quality issue. I had way too many carbs for my genetic tolerance. Additionally, I had joint pain that was really bad. I mean, this is in my 20s and 30s. And I was having old joint pain in my fingers, like an old man. And within a couple months of doing the anti-inflammatory recommendations from my genetics, all my joint pain went away. It's just gone because I had a way higher propensity to overinflame than other people. Therefore, the amount of lifestyle and nutritional interventions were way beyond what people needed. So in my personal case, and don't do this, but this was for me, I needed actually need more than initially, need 6 grams of fish oil a day for months. I actually did 9 grams for 5 months. Don't do that. I did 9 grams a day for 5 months. But my baseline, what I need is about 6 grams a day for maintenance. It's way higher than the average person. I was doing 1-2 grams. It's fish oil. It's great. It wasn't enough because I was so much of an overinflamer that I needed way more genetically than the average person. So this is where I am. So this is me in stand-up comic when I first did my graduation class in New Zealand. This is Lily, stand-up comedy in Boulder. This is at a seminar out in Portland with some new friends who are also like really fun and health conscious. And I'm just like so much healthier because of it. And now we're going to dive into inflammation. So inflammation is this really big bugaboo when it comes to people's health. And so the intention of inflammation is to get rid of infections and to heal injuries. So what we want, so for example, if I'm a hunter-gatherer and I'm in a hunting party and I'm trying to hunt a large animal with a tiny stick, and that animal has hooves, teeth, horns, and hooves, teeth, horns, and funny. And they can, and I'm at risk of being bitten, trampled, or gored. And I need to have a robust inflammatory response to what? Rush into the injury. Say I'm bitten. So what happened? I got injected with a whole bunch of pathogens from the bite, plus tissue was rendered, and I need inflammation to come in and supply a lot of blood to heal the tissue and inflammation to kill the infections. So that's the point of inflammation. So inflammation is not bad. The problem is if it's overdone too quickly for too long. So if now, because I have a wicked inflammatory response, if I was a hunter-gatherer, I would likely survive a wolf attack more than my underinflaming colleagues, because I would have more inflammation to come in urgently to kill the infection and heal up the wound. The problem is that if I'm in today's world where I have a tendency to overinflame, but no basis for which that is an actual advantage over time, like the survivability of a hunting party over multiple generations in an environment that doesn't really shift from decade to decade, century to century, millennia to millennia, because I'm in still the same Stone Age type technology and civilization and culture, etc., then my hyper-inflammatory genes are an advantage if I'm in a hunter-gatherer society, but at a disadvantage in over the long term for survivability if I'm in a environment that doesn't have risks of injuries or being bitten. So now I overinflame in general, so I'll have a less lifespan over the long term, where I would have had a longer lifespan over the short term relative to my hunting party buddies back in the Stone Age. So I hope that explains why when I sat and looked at my genetics, I'm an overinflamer. I was like, okay, this is just a mismatch based on my current environment, but it was actually a benefit in certain situations based on Paleolithic constructs. So that's what purpose of inflammation. I want to demonize inflammation so we understand it and not just like attack it as something awful, because what I don't want to do is to otherize the body or otherize the genes. It's like me and my body, like they're two separate things. Like I'm at war, which is what I experienced. My perception of my body for the first 2 decades of my life was that it was me versus my body, and that's not a healthy state to be in. So that's why I take the time to explain why inflammation is important, because if being partners with your body as opposed to otherizing your body will be a massive step towards health and longevity. So too much inflammation leads to this inferno, and it leads to chronic inflammation, which is definitely a problem, because chronic inflammation causes all sorts of problems. You want it to come in, like a fire department, you want inflammation to come in, solve the emergency, and leave. And then your body has a place to rebuild. You can't rebuild a house if someone's constantly soaking down the house with water and chopping in the windows, doors, and walls. You need the emergency to be over. You need the response to leave. And then you send in the general contractor to fix everything up. Inflammation is the fire department. And you just want them to do their job and get out. So chronic inflammation also leads to stubborn weight gain. And here's why. There's 3 types of weight gain. The main one that I see, and the one that there's the one that people think is the most common, which is the calorie fat weight gain, where you eat calories, you get fat. That's actually the least common cause of weight gain. The most common cause is this one, inflammatory water weight. So what inflammatory water weight is that when you get inflamed, whether it's from an injury or you eat inflammatory foods or you over exercise, what happens is that you start to put on these inflammatory chemicals fill your body. And in fact, what I lectured at the genetics conferences on is on inflammatory weight gain, and showing how it wasn't calories, it was inflammation causing all of this weight. And what happens is that when you have inflammatory chemicals, they're very damaging and toxic to the body. So what that means is that your body will do what? Retain water in order to dilute the toxic inflammatory chemicals. in order to do what? Buy the liver and kidneys time to excrete these inflammatory chemicals. So what that means practically is that inflammation, you swelling up with weight from inflammation, is your body's way to protect you and protect your cells and your tissues from being damaged by inflammatory chemicals. So that's how people can rapidly put on weight if they eat something that's very inflammatory. So there's something called the Muffin Test, where if you eat a little muffin, but you gain, 2 to 4 pounds in that day. Now, unless that muffin was last year's regifted Christmas fruitcake, it didn't weigh 2 to 4 pounds. So what happened was that your body took the toxic chemicals, as the sugar, the gluten, or the dough conditioners, the preservatives, or whatever it was, or the chemicals. So I just got to notice my VPN disconnected. So I'm just going to go back a little bit in case I missed that. So if the muffin may be inflammatory from the sugar, the chemicals, the colors, the dyes, the gluten, the dough conditioners, the preservatives, whatever it is. And so your body takes that in, no matter how small it is. And then you have this based on your genetics. If you have an exuberant inflammatory response like I do, you can just get this flood of inflammatory chemicals. And then people can blimp up by retaining water. And that's how you can put on 2 to 4 pounds from even a tiny little muffin. And then the solution is that you identify what combinations of inflammatory genes are overactive, and then you find the fewest number of lifestyle interventions that will help all of those inflammatory genes synergistically, so that then you can rapidly drop the weight. That's what happened with Alfredo that I mentioned before, is that we got him off the things that were inflammatory. He also had a toxic weight issue with the alcohol, and he was able to rapidly drop weight, 27 pounds in 3 months. The next type of weight is hormonal toxic weight. And that's if you're having problems with liver, particularly dealing with estrogen, getting rid of estrogen, and in phase 2 pathways and kind of other technical jargon. But basically, if you can't detox, your body will throw toxic chemicals into the fat cells, which are the dirty closets of the body. So if you can't detox properly, meaning you can't take toxins, convert them through the liver and kidneys, and excrete them out through the urine and feces properly, these toxic chemicals circulate around, and then they just are thrown into the fat cells for safe storage until such a time you're able to, if you got a dirty closet in your house, you don't just randomly open up and start cleaning it out. You have to like prep the room, make sure there's an exit, that everything's going to go somewhere, like the garbage, recycling, donation, whatever it's going to be. It's the same thing with the body. You don't just release all this toxic chemical stuff at once, because that could be really overwhelming and damaging. In fact, I had a colleague of mine in chiropractic school who was an airline pilot. He got very, very sick from an infection and lost a lot of weight very quickly. And what happened is that he lost basically almost all of his short-term memory, where he had trouble remembering his number or where he lived, because all those toxic chemicals from being in the airline industry were stored in his fat, suddenly got released all at once. And so if there's no fat on his body, where there's a guaranteed source of fat, his brain. So all those toxic chemicals went to his brain and screwed up his brain. That's why he lost his short-term memory. So he was able to finally detox it all out. So what you do for toxic weight is different for what you do with inflammatory weight, different set of recommendations and protocols. Then there's the calorie fat weight. This is the calories in, weight on. There are 16 genes on the genetics profile, the Achieve Your Natural Weight profile, that look at your calorie fat weight. There's 15, really more than 15. There's 15 inflammatory genes here. The hormonal toxic weight, there's 8. I'll add a couple more, but there's at least 8 there. And the calorie fat weight gene, there's 16 genes here that say, are you vulnerable to putting on weight from calories? Now, at the conferences I've lectured on, these were gentlemen who were way overweight, but they had near perfect calorie fat weight, but they had terrible inflammatory and hormonal toxic weight. And I was able to help them drop a massive amount of weight in a short amount of time. But it wasn't from starving them and telling them to exercise more. I modified it to the genes. Now, the other benefit of looking at these genetic profiles is you can help future-proof your brain. So I'm dealing with neurodegeneration with my father. He has dementia, and he's, he was a monolith in his field. His name's Dr. Jonathan Shea, MD, PhD. My mother's also a medical doctor. My father wrote 2 books on PTSD and moral injury, and got a MacArthur Genius Award. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that uh, that genius is now completely gone. His dementia is so far advanced that he has some of his long-term memory, but he can barely remember what room he's in at this point. And this is happening in real time, and it's very tragic on multiple levels. And so, why does neurodegeneration happen? Well, people can be genetically vulnerable to neurodegeneration, and you do the exact same things. You look at the genes that are rogue, that are not good. In my case, and in my father's case, it's the genes that help regulate free radical damage, particularly the mitochondria. The free radical damage in the mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell, and particularly the nerves. And your nerves can only run on these highly efficient electricity factories called mitochondria. And if your mitochondria genetically are very, very vulnerable to free radical damage because you don't have the genes that are to readily create the janitors to clean up all the sparks that come from free radicals, then your factories can become very damaged over time, and then they can't generate the electricity, and then the nerves of the brain fail, which is what's happening to my father. On top of that, there's also cardiovascular and circulation genes that help circulate blood through their brains to deliver nutrients, and those are also compromised on my father's side and my side. So when I look at my genes, I look at what can I do, what do I need to do to help prevent these genes from becoming problematic in the future. So controlling free radicals, controlling inflammation, which also ties into neurodegeneration, controlling cardiovascular circulation. Now, your genes also will, these genetic testing will also talk about your ideal diet, which would, in my case, talk about the carb tolerance. So people have different carb tolerances. You can be low carb. You can now genetically test for, are you a keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? And that test changed my life. I wish I'd had that 20 years ago. So some people are keto, some people are paleo, some people are Mediterranean, some people are high carb. And I do not buy the myth that there's one diet for everyone. That's a lie. That is a technical lie. There are people who do really well on a diet, then write books and make podcasts and have practices built around their unique diet that happen to work for them. And then they make a thing out of it, as opposed to doing testing that shows what diet you actually are. For me, I am a very low carb paleo diet. So there's low carb paleo, a moderate carb paleo, higher carb paleo. Then there's low carb Mediterranean, and then gray shades of gray to higher carb Mediterranean, then high carb, and then keto's at the very bottom, very, very low carb. So there's multiple different types of diet. Now, I didn't say vegetarian versus non-vegetarian. I'm talking about carb ratios, which makes sense because carbs were available only in certain regions, particularly the closer you are to the equator. Like you can grow more carbs, whereas up north in the Arctic, or my ancestry from northern Russia, there's not a lot of carbs up there, but there's certainly a lot of protein and fat, and chasing animals and stuff. So some healthy choices could be hurting you. We talked about eating the muffin and the 5 pounds overnight from the inflammatory weight gain. Some people are easily overinflamed that too much exercise makes them fatter. That's also what I lectured on in those conferences. It's very demoralizing, to say at least. The more you exercise, the fatter you get. And if you know your genetics, and you're empowered, you can get on the right diet, you can know the right types of exercise, and you can also realize that for some people, including me, sunlight ain't going to cut it for getting vitamin D. There's 8 or so genes between sunlight and your blood in terms of vitamin D. And if there are too many variants in that pathway, you just have a difficult time converting sunlight to vitamin D. Now, Genetics testing comes, I do them in a package because I tried to do them individually at some point for a period of time. And it just wasn't working well because each thing answers another piece of the puzzle. So I do them all at once. The Achieve Your Natural Weight Profile, which is the one I talked about that checks like the inflammatory genes, the free radical genes, the liver genes, the weight, the fat and energy metabolism genes, the cardiovascular genes. There's a couple other things in there as well. The Find Your Ideal Diet is your carb tolerance. They understand your trigger foods. That's what I mentioned in the beginning, which is the alcohol, caffeine, salt, gluten, lactose, histamines, and other food intolerances. Your vitamin D pathways, your ability to synthesize it, as well as your ability to absorb it into your cells, and immunity support, which is, an important thing these days. So knowing your genes can be massive relief. And what it comes with is the relief of knowing what to do for life. That it is such a gift to be able to know what you need to do based on your genetics, and you can just get started now. Now, mainstream genetics testing tells you very little about your health because they just overwhelm you with data and they don't prioritize it and they don't organize it. It's really frustrating. Whereas what I do is I reduce the genetics down to the most important genes for your health and then give you practical rank ordered recommendations on what you need. So what we're doing now is a great question because genetics testing for your health has been in such an immense interest from my community. And since we're approaching the holiday season, get ready for it. I want to make it even easier for you and your loved ones to get tested. So I've literally never done this before, but you know the best part? Genetics testing for your health is now, drum roll, 50% off for Black Friday. I'm offering 50% off my complete genetics package. You're going to get all sorts of goodies with this. And Crystal will pop in the genetics link to buy now. This is a 50% off. This I do not do this, so please take advantage of this now. What you're going to get is all 5 of these tests, one-on-one phone support from Michaela, my health coach. You'll have the report of findings with me, where we go over all the results with me personally. I give you a fully customized report of findings, like it's your personal Rosetta Stone, and there'll also be some free goodies as well, extra information for those of you in the US who get a free supplement organizer for you. And other fun stuff is other goodies coming down the line to help for those that sign up. Now, oh, I clicked on it and it's just taking me right to the buy now page. That's funny. All right. Now, as a big thank you, I'm going to send you my newest lifestyle guide for your genetics. What I've done is basically taken the most important lifestyle recommendations that I've found to be the most common across all genetics testing, and I've bundled it into one concise PDF. Now, the people who buy the genetics package will get that, plus all the super customized recommendations for you and how to implement what in what order. So you go here, which is to bit.ly/genetics50. Currency is in US dollars. Thank you for asking that question. So this is USD. And if you purchase it using your credit card or PayPal, it's going to be converted into USD. Now, hold on. It just kind of went full screen and switched to, there we go. All right, I'm not sure why the screen shifted there. All right, so your genes hold your keys to your hidden health. We'll walk through exactly. So when you click on this, it'll take you to this screen. So now you know what to expect. You'll see the price. Normally, the investment is $3,087. That when the complete genetics package is normally $3,087. And what that includes is all 5 profiles, support for test kit completion and shipping, all the lab fees, the written recommendations, your personal Rosetta Stone, the 60-minute report of findings with me, the bonus gifts if you're in the US. For half off, it's $1,543.50. And then you can pick if you want to do credit card or PayPal. Here's the link, bit.ly/genetics50. And we'll walk you through all the genetics tests. And the goal is to leverage genetics testing so you can live in harmony with your body. And so I want to open this up for Q&A and to ask everyone what questions do they have about genetics testing, the genetics tests, etc. There we go.
Beautiful. I'm excited for this opportunity for people because I know there's a lot of folks who have been interested. So Kimberly's asking, can you show a sample report?
Sure. I can.
While you're bringing that up, there's a food tolerance question. Is it just categories or specific foods? How does that work?
So there are specific foods. So there's categories and foods. It's both, and it depends. It depends. So what I'm gonna do also, let me just get the sample report. I'm gonna pull up Dr. Tabitha's because I did a podcast with her where she actually went over her genetics report in real time in a recorded podcast. So her genetics report is public, literally public. So it's totally fine for me to share hers. I'm just trying to think of like, wait, who do I shares here? Because I don't want to violate anyone's privacy, but she explicitly allowed that. So it should be okay. Give me a second here. Let me just pull that up. Any other questions while I am pulling?
Yeah, feel free to pop those questions in the chat. I know for me personally, the connection between inflammation and genes was like super fascinating to me because I didn't know it went that deep.
Yeah,
It's really powerful.
if people struggle with weight, this is a total game changer. Because if people have been struggling, it's inflammatory almost always, or inflammatory plus liver. So this is a sample report. I'm not going to go through like all of it. It's like 29 slides and we don't have time. But a sample report is going through, like in her case, she was a Mediterranean style diet, and there's all the recommendations of what she should do and what that means practically. There's also the key of understanding her food triggers. So green dot, yellow dot, red dot is just so gluten means she's not at risk for celiac. Whereas people who are red dot are very much at risk for celiac. People who are green dot are fine with lactose. Yellow dot for alcohol, so she was recommended to like stay away from alcohol. She has a yellow dot for caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. I'm a red dot in this. I'm also a red dot in alcohol. Salts for blood pressure. So when I see this with someone, I don't say immediately cut all salt for blood pressure. One, it's like, do they have blood pressure? And also, are they dealing with other things like stress, height, excess weight, smoking status, alcohol, sleep apnea, thyroid, adrenal, or kidney issues, lack of exercise? So if people have all of these things handled and their blood pressure is still high, then we look at cutting salt as kind of the missing thing. We don't run to blame salt. So this is the difference between, this is a really important point because I've dealt with people before who get their genetics report from some other person or situation or institution, and they're like, oh, I can't have salt because my genes say it's bad. And I'm like, have you ever had high blood pressure in the 50 years you've been on this planet? Never. It's like, then what are you doing? So it's like, that's why you need a clinical interpretation. And by the way, the tone of my voice wasn't directed at that person. It was directed at the fear mongering the report was relaying to her. Like it's that people can get really locked into fear around their genetics. And that's why it's super critical to actually work with an expert on this to tell you what is worth really paying attention to in what order. So salt is one of the prime examples of that. Then we've got things like histamine tolerance. So if people are dealing with histamine issues, you can find the genetic risk factors for that. Then we can make alterations in diet there's certain supplements you can take to help with histamine. And then there's also looking at overall food allergens. And then there's looking at things like vitamin D. In her case, she had a really hard time. Now, this is the summary report. This is not the official 100+ pages of all the data and everything that I had to sift through to boil it down and simplify it into these practical things. In her case, she had a really hard time overall absorbing synthesizing vitamin D from the sun, and a hard time even absorbing vitamin D3 into the cells. So we had to do specialized things in order to help her get the vitamin D in her blood, and then other things to help the vitamin D get into her cells. Then in her case, like with the natural weight profile, she had massively pro-inflammatory, but it was really split. The 5 genes that initiated inflammation were really good, green dots, but the rest of the genes were just the genes that propagate inflammation, the genes that extinguish inflammation were not good, were yellow and red dots. 11 out of the 15 total inflammatory genes were red and yellow. The vast majority of the ones that were green, I think all of them, were actually in the initiation. So she could prevent the initiation of inflammation, but had a hard time stopping it. And we can go on. And there's other, I'll just kind of scroll down to the example of like, this is explaining what's going on. And then this was her personalized list of exactly what she needed to do in what order. And it's ordered in such a way that is unique to you, that I find the fewest number of interventions that beneficially shift the red dots to behave more greenish. So for example, those recommendations in that order of importance will help her genes not ever stop being red, but help them behave more greenish. That's what epigenetics is. Epigenetics is how your lifestyle changes the expression of your genes. If you're a green dot or a red dot means you're starting farther behind the line at the starting gate. But if you, with the conditioning, recommendations, discipline, etc., you can still run and compete with the green dots. And what you do, that's what's rank ordered. And the reason how I rank order it is I find what's the fewest number, or like there's over 100 recommendations I can do, but I rank order like the top 30 or so. Like what's the one thing that's going to help 12 of these red dots, not 12 separate things for each individual dot. And that's how I can reduce down the number of practical things you can do to help the massive clusters of genes. So I hope that was helpful.
Great. Yeah, there's one other question that came through as well. What's the difference between your genetics test and other genetics tests on the market that offer the same service?
They don't prioritize the genes. So there's 4 things you need to look for in a genetics test. Number 1, in terms of health, number 1, do they test the genes that actually control the drivers of all diseases? The drivers are inflammation, free radical damage scavenging, liver detox, vitamin D utilization, cardiovascular circulation, methylation, fat and energy metabolism. Those are all. So I'm not looking for the heart disease gene, the cancer gene, the stroke gene, the diabetes gene. I'm looking for the drivers that, if provoked over a long enough term, start to poke on the quote unquote disease gene. So I'm going meta. I'm looking at the most important upstream genes. That's the first qualification. Do they check for all of those genes? Number 2, of those drivers, are they looking for the genes that are the generals, that are the most important? There's hundreds of genes that deal with inflammation, but do they deal with the top 15 that control the hundreds and hundreds underneath them? And they're not all of equal weight. The third priority is, are there at least 10% variations in the general population of the gene you're testing? So if I'm going to test a gene like TNF alpha, do 10% or more of the population have a variation to a red or yellow dot? The answer is yes. Not some super obscure inflammatory gene that only 0.0000001% have a red or yellow dot. That's not relevant to the vast majority of the population. We're looking at the big movers that are most likely to show up on a genetics test. And then the fourth criteria is that do these genes have peer-reviewed research done on humans, not wombats or nematodes, to show that the lifestyle recommendations, like diet, nutrition, exercise, etc., specific ones, can change the expression of those red and yellow dot genes, those variant genes, to behave more green-like. So those are the 4 qualities you're looking for. This is the only lab that I found that fills all 4 of those categories. And I have taken their information and I have further made it more practical and clinical than just merely the data. And I'm the only one that I know of that actually sorts, like what you saw was that recommendation list for that individual person was, here are the recommendations that help the most important genes, the inflammation genes, the free radical genes, liver detox, vitamin D, methylation genes, of the in her case, the 26 genes that are red and yellow dots. What intervention, lifestyle intervention, not drugs, helps the most number? In her case, one of them helped 12 out of those 26 genes. So that's how it differs, is the analysis. You can, the other thing, to be really frank, is that the lab that I use is over 99% accuracy. I know, I've been there and they showed me their technology, how they do it. I promise not to share how they do it, but it was pretty amazing. Whereas you read the fine print of 23andMe and Ancestry, they only guarantee 95% accuracy. That means 1 in 20 genes that they show is wrong. And so that matters. And I've compared the genetics company I use with 23andMe, and I found discrepancies. And what do? I always go with this one because this one's more accurate, and they showed me how and why. So those are the differences: is your level of analysis, the practicality, implementation of the analysis, and the accuracy of the testing.
Beautiful. I just want to acknowledge the time. If anybody needs to head out, you can go ahead and use the bit.ly link in the chat here. I'm going to post it right there. Also, if you still have questions for Dr. Sam, there's still one more question that we can get to, but I just want to acknowledge the time for everybody. If you still have questions, go ahead and book a free health strategy call.
Oh, good call.
Where you can go ahead and sit with Dr. Sam to address your questions. I know a lot of us have been on a very long health journey already, so we want to, partner with someone that really knows their stuff. And I can definitely vouch for Dr. Sam in that way. He's a total pro. But more than anything, we wanted to get this genetics offer to you because it's truly one of a kind testing, and then a one of a kind sale on top of that. So we're excited about it. The one other question that came through, Dr. Sam, is can this help with chemical sensitivities? Okay, so the thing about chemical sensitivities, it's a very complex issue. So the number one thing about chemical sensitivities is to get out of exposure. This is number one thing, is cut exposure as much as you can. And for some people that may not be totally possible, but that's the first and foremost, is to reduce exposure. Then for those that are still dealing with chemical sensitivities or want to reduce their toxic burden so they're not as sensitive going forward, the answer is yes, it absolutely can. Because if you are in a hyperinflamed state, you're more sensitive to toxic chemicals because your liver is preoccupied dealing with inflammation and not detoxing toxins. Also, if we can identify in your genetics issues in your liver detox pathways and support them, then your ability to clear toxins is going to be much better. Also, if we can get your diet dialed in and remove the food triggers, your genetic-based food triggers, then you'll have less burden on your liver and immune system because you're not going to be provoking them with what you might think will be healthy lifestyle or benign lifestyle, but is actually causing problems. So by reducing the burden on your body, it's going to help with the chemical sensitivities. Now, if after you do genetics and the chemical sensitivities are not resolved to the way you want, there's other functional tests that are available, like advanced mitochondria panels to look at the liver, to look at the current status of the liver pathways themselves, looking at the amino acids that are precursors to chemical detox. Genetics doesn't tell you the level of amino acids you have now or the level of glutathione you have now. They tell you different things that are incredibly valuable, but they're different from the
timestamp thumbprint of what your physiology is now with functional testing. So genetics and functional testing do really well going together, but you can do the genetics separately because those results don't change no matter what. But you can still get all the practical information that is catered to your specific genetic die roll, your genetic combination, that you can start implementing for life. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll sign off.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah. And again, if people want to chat with me, I've got the link there, drsamshea.com/health strategy or health-strategy. And if you know that this is right for you, just go ahead and get the genetics at 50% off. And when you purchase, you'll then be led through a small sequence of just getting the information we need in order to send you the test kits right away. And we'll go from there. And I'd like to thank everyone for showing up. I'd like to thank Crystal for helping me coordinate all of this and putting in all those really funny slides as well. And
light, you know?
Yeah, of course. Of course. All right. Anything else, Crystal? Otherwise, I think we'll sign off.
That's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.
Okay. Bye.